They tell you love is a safe harbor, built on promises and protected by vows. For me, it became a perfect crime scene, a secret architecture where every brick is a masterful lie. We didn't set out to burn everything down. We just wanted to feel something that didn't belong to anyone else, something that was mine, but could only exist in the dark, in this room. Every touch he gives carries the ghost of another woman's life. But the warmth of his skin is the only truth I accept. We are beautifully guilty, creating a perfect, terrifying sanctuary of sin, and I can't look away. The golden petals of the sunflowers felt soft against my fingertips, a vibrant contrast to the cold, metallic weight of the velvet box hidden deep within my coat pocket. Ryder loved sunflowers. He always said they reminded him of the winner's podium, Tutti of the champagne showers, of the bright, untouchable future we were building together. For the past 5 years, his victories had been my victories. My entire existence had been carefully, deliberately orchestrated around his ambitions. People knew me as Alexis Davenport, the sharp-suited manager who had pulled a failing racing team from the brink of bankruptcy. What they didn't know, what even Ryder himself didn't know, was that underneath the tailored blazers, the blood of a champion still pumped fiercely through my veins. On the underground circuits, they used to call me the Queen. I was the phantom racer he idolized. Yet, I had willingly traded my helmet for a headset, surrendering the roar of my own engine to ensure his name echoed through the grandstands. I gave up the track so he could own it. And today, on the anniversary of our team's first major win, I was ready to give him the rest of my life. I, the 30-year-old heiress who had never bowed to anyone, was going to ask this 25-year-old prodigy to marry me. I walked down the dimly lit corridor toward the VIP lounge, holding the extravagant bouquet of yellow blooms. The faint sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifted through the partially open door. Ryder's voice, familiar and intoxicating, cut through the ambient noise. I paused, a soft smile tugging at my lips, preparing to push the door open and surprise him. "Come on, Ryder, you've got it all," a teammate's voice echoed through the hallway. "You are undefeated on the track, and you've got a beautiful girl who absolutely adores you. When are you going to put a ring on it? Marry Alexis." Dude. My breath caught in my throat. I waited for his defense, for the warm, confident declaration of love he always gave me in private. Instead, what followed was a careless, dismissive scoff that paralyzed every muscle in my body. "No, she's just practice." Ryder's voice drifted through the crack in the door, casual and incredibly cruel. "Practice for what?" another voice asked, confused. "For Kathy, obviously," Ryder replied without a second of hesitation. "We all know Kathy is the reason I got into racing. She's my muse. Alexis. I mean, hell, she doesn't even know me, let alone racing. She gave me 5 years, yeah, 5 of her best years. I can't just crush her out of nowhere. But we all know she's just a placeholder." The word struck me with the violent force of a high-speed collision. Practice. Placeholder. 5 years of my life, my sacrificed career, my sleepless nights negotiating with sponsors, my silent, unwavering devotion, all of it reduced to a waiting room for another woman. Kathy. The teammate who had rejected him years ago for not being experienced enough in bed or in life. He had used my heart, my body, and my resources as a training ground to make himself worthy of someone else. All my careful arrangements, the pale gold tablecloths, the orange soda he loved, the very sunflowers in my hands, suddenly felt like the punchline to a sickening joke. Everything I thought I knew about him came from his obsession with another woman. I looked down at the bouquet. A moment ago, it was a symbol of our bright future. Now it just looked pathetic, its yellow leaves wilting under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hallway. The heat of humiliation threatened to rise behind my eyes, a stinging physical pain in my chest. But I refused to let a single tear fall. I am a Davenport. I am the queen of the track. I do not beg for affection, and I certainly do not weep for boys who are too blind to see the gold they hold. Slowly, without making a sound, I stepped back from the door. My free hand slipped into my pocket, my fingers wrapping tightly around the velvet box containing a custom-designed ring that would never touch his finger. The love I had nurtured for half a decade didn't die a fiery, dramatic death. It froze over in an absolute instant, replaced by a crystalline clarity. Ryder Kane wanted a muse who understood racing. He was about to find out exactly who he had been playing with. I walked away from the VIP lounge, the sound of Ryder's careless laughter fading into the sterile quiet of the corridor. Pushing through the heavy exit doors, the cold night air hit my face, shocking my system into absolute sobriety. I found a steel trash receptacle near the alleyway, and without a second of hesitation, dropped the extravagant bouquet of sunflowers into the dark bin. The velvet ring box remained heavy in my coat pocket, no longer a token of a bright future, but a harsh, metallic reminder of my own foolishness. 5 years of playing the endlessly supportive, understanding girlfriend she'd from my shoulders like a cheap, suffocating coat. I had diminished my own light to make sure Ryder shined the brightest. I was not just Alexis the manager, though I had played the part flawlessly. I was Alexis Davenport, the sole heir to a corporate empire. For years, my family had been relentlessly pressuring me to secure our legacy through a strategic alliance with the Hale family. I had fought them tooth and nail, defending my true love for Ryder, stubbornly believing that the empire we were building on the track was my real future. How entirely naive. I pulled my phone from my bag, my fingers steady as I scrolled past Ryder's name and dialed a number I had memorized but never intended to use. It rang twice before a deep, measured voice answered. Miss Davenport, to what do I owe the pleasure at this hour? Mr. Hale was a man of business, sharp, pragmatic, and entirely devoid of the volatile, boyish charm that Ryder possessed. He was exactly what I needed. Mr. Hale, I said, my voice echoing with a terrifying, hollow calm. I am calling to accept your family's proposal. However, I'm sure you know that before agreeing to marry you, I had just ended a relationship. There was a brief, calculated pause on the other end of the line. I am aware, he replied smoothly. As long as you won't regret it, Miss Davenport. I looked back at the brick wall of the club, imagining the man inside who was currently laughing about how he used my devotion as a training ground. I won't regret it either, I answered. Have your lawyers send over the marriage contract. Let's proceed. Hanging up, a phantom ache bloomed in my chest, the ghost of a 5-year delusion dying a sudden, violent death, but I welcomed the sting. When something is rotting, you have to cut the rot. It hurts, yes, but at least I am the one holding the knife. I refused to be a passive victim, letting an infection spread and consume the rest of my youth. I was taking the blade to it myself, excising Ryder Kane from my life with surgical precision. There was one final piece of business to handle. I dialed the events coordinator for the exclusive West Side venue. They were expecting a grand, meticulously planned proposal event for Ryder in exactly 5 days. Hello, "This is Alexis Davenport," I said as soon as she picked up. "There has been a change of plans regarding my reservation." "Oh, Miss Davenport, good evening," the coordinator chirped. "Did you want to switch the pale gold tablecloths back to white?" "No," I replied, my tone leaving no room for pleasantries or negotiation. "Cancel the proposal arrangements. Scratch the orange soda and the racing decor. Keep the reservation, but we are repurposing the venue. It will be a wedding. A mine." I gave the bewildered coordinator the new details, ignoring her stammering shock as I instructed her to coordinate with the Hale family's estate manager. By the time I ended the call, my transformation was complete. The devoted, background-dwelling manager was dead, buried under the ashes of a burned bridge. In 5 days, I would become Mrs. Hale, solidifying a multi-billion-dollar empire. I would let the next 5 days bury the last 5 years, and Ryder wouldn't even see the wreckage coming. The next 48 hours required a masterful performance. I continued my duties as the team manager, my demeanor perfectly composed, shielding the cold, hard machinery of my impending exit. Ryder didn't notice the shift. He was too consumed by a sudden, frantic energy, a vibration that explained itself when his phone lit up with a name I hadn't heard in years. Kathy was back in town, stranded at the airport and demanding a ride. We drove to the terminal together, my presence merely a coincidence of our scheduling. Ryder's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the curb with the desperate anticipation of a man waiting for rain in a drought. When he spotted her, the transformation was instantaneous. The arrogant, untouchable champion melted into an eager, breathless boy. Kathy dragged her luggage to the curb, exuding the effortless, entitled confidence of someone who knew her place had been kept warm. Ryder leaped out of the car, practically vibrating as he pulled her into an embrace that lasted a fraction of a second too long for a supposed platonic reunion. "Alexis, hi, this is Kathy, my old teammate," Ryder stammered as I stepped out, gesturing vaguely between us. "Kathy, this is Alexis, my manager and my girlfriend." Kathy looked me up and down, a smirk playing on her lips. She didn't see a threat. She saw a temporary placeholder. "Nice to meet you," she drawled, her tone dripping with condescension. "Damn, Ryder. Since when did you start keeping secrets? Though I suppose she's basically one of the guys." I offered a polite, sterile smile, feeling absolutely nothing. The jealousy that might have consumed me days ago was entirely absent, replaced by the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a highly predictable and pathetic experiment. "I call shotgun," Kathy suddenly announced, making a beeline for the passenger door. Ryder hesitated, glancing at me. Lexi usually sits in the front." Kathy paused, her hand on the door handle casting a mocking look over her shoulder. "Oh, is your girlfriend jealous? Sucks to be her. Ryder and I have always been like this. Old habits, I guess." A sharp, distinct memory surfaced in my mind. Years ago, under the neon lights of an underground track, another racer had told me, "A racer's front seat is always reserved for the woman he loves." "It's fine," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "Take the front, Kathy. I don't belong there anymore." I slid into the back seat, allowing the door to click shut like the closing of a heavy vault. As Ryder pulled the car onto the highway, the space in front of me crackled with their shared history. They finished each other's sentences, reminiscing about inside jokes and late-night practices. But the true revelation wasn't in their endless banter. It was in the physical space around them. "No way," Kathy suddenly gasped, reaching into the center console. "My favorite orange soda?" You still keep it in your car, Ryder? I knew you didn't forget about me. I stared at the bright orange bottle. For 5 years, I had meticulously stocked our fridge and his car with that exact brand, genuinely believing it was his lucky charm. And my sunflower stickers are still here on the dashboard. Kathy laughed, tracing the faded yellow petals. And is that the gold ribbon I gave you? Sitting in the shadows of the back seat, a quiet, chilling realization settled over my bones. The pale gold I had chosen for the tablecloths. The orange soda I had planned for the toast. The very sunflowers I had held in my hands to propose. None of it was about Ryder. Everything I thought I knew about the man I loved, every quirk I had painstakingly catered to, were merely the lingering ghosts of another woman. I hadn't been loving him. I had been serving as the groundskeeper to a shrine he built for his first love. Looking at the back of Ryder's head, any remaining flicker of resentment extinguished itself into ash. You cannot be angry at a ghost, and you cannot be betrayed by a man who never truly belonged to you. I leaned back into the cool leather seats, watching the city lights blur past the window, silently counting down the hours until my wedding. The welcome back party was held at our team's usual haunt, a dimly lit bar that smelled of stale beer and adrenaline. Kathy immediately held court at the center of the table, flanked by the very teammates whose contracts I had meticulously negotiated and secured. I sat quietly next to Ryder, my focus entirely on the plate in front of him. I was routinely cutting his steak into smaller, easily digestible pieces, a necessity I had carefully managed since his major stomach surgery 4 months prior. Kathy's eyes tracked the movement of my knife, a condescending smirk stretching across her face. "Wow, someone actually fusses over you," she drawled, leaning across the table to ensure everyone was listening. "You're the team's manager, right? Do you actually know anything about racing?" The question hung in the air, heavy with deliberate disrespect. A few of the newer team members shifted uncomfortably, well aware that my business acumen had saved the team from bankruptcy years ago. But none of them knew the true, hilarious irony of her question. I met Kathy's gaze, feeling a flicker of dark, quiet amusement. Do I know anything about racing? I was the phantom they all studied on late-night video replays. I was the queen, the very standard they tried to beat on the underground circuits. They were sitting here, mocking their idol to her face. "I know the basics," I replied with a calm, perfectly measured voice. "But my job is to manage the team." "Right, so you don't really understand racing," Kathy scoffed, dismissing me instantly. She turned her attention to the rest of the table, raising her glass. Team tradition. When a new member joins, the captain chugs 5 beers. But considering what Ryder and I have been through together, let's make it 10. My hand shot out instinctively, covering Ryder's glass before he could reach for it. "Kathy, Ryder had stomach surgery. He really shouldn't drink like that." I looked at Ryder, expecting him to back me up, to gently explain his physical limits. Instead, he avoided my eyes entirely. A nervous, eager smile was plastered on his face as he looked at Kathy, desperate for her validation. No, it's okay," Ryder stammered, gently prying my fingers away from his glass. "I can handle 10 beers." 3, I stated firmly, my voice hardening as I shifted fully into my authoritative role. "That's it. You have a race next week. You can't wreck your body. I am your manager, just listen to me." Kathy slammed her hand onto the table, the sudden noise silencing the surrounding chatter. "Excuse me. This is between Ryder and me," she snapped, her eyes flashing with territorial malice. "Aren't you like 30? This game is for young people. If you can't keep up, just stay out of it. She didn't wait for my response. She turned her full attention back to Ryder, lowering her voice into a dangerous, manipulative purr. So, Ryder, are you going to listen to me or her? 10 beers. Not one less. You better listen to me, or I might start ghosting you again. She paused, a wicked gleam in her eye. Or we can do it like the old days. You drink a beer, I take something off. It was a vulgar, blatant provocation, a test of loyalty disguised as a cheap bar trick. I sat back, folding my arms, and watched the man I had spent 5 years building up face his defining choice. Ryder didn't even hesitate. He reached out, grabbed the first pint, and began to chug. 1, 2, 3. He was visibly wincing, his face flushing an unhealthy shade of red as the sheer volume of alcohol aggravated his unhealed stomach lining. He was physically hurting himself, willingly risking his health, his career, and his upcoming race, all to satisfy the ego of a woman who had once discarded him. Watching him suffer for her amusement, the final thin thread of my obligations snapped. I had spent half a decade worrying about his diet, his training schedule, his mental state, and his public image. I had shielded him from every conceivable consequence. But as he slammed the 5th empty glass onto the scratched wood, coughing violently while Kathy cheered, I felt an absolute liberating wave of apathy wash over me. He was a blind fool, eager to destroy his own empire for a ghost who didn't respect him. And I? I was officially off the clock. My tenure as the devoted girlfriend had ended 2 nights ago. My reign as his manager had just expired in this very booth. I didn't need to protect him anymore, because I finally realized there was nothing left worth saving. By the time Ryder forced down the 8th glass, his bravado had entirely melted into a sickening, sloppy desperation. The alcohol hit his compromised stomach with immediate violence, but it was the effect on his mind that was truly pathetic to witness. He stumbled out of the booth, his legs buckling beneath him. It wasn't a graceful descent. He practically collapsed onto the sticky, beer-stained floor of the bar, landing directly at Kathy's feet. The loud chatter of the team faded into a heavy, uncomfortable silence. I took a deliberate step back, allowing the shadows of the dimly lit room to swallow me. I was no longer a participant in this scene. I was merely the audience to a tragedy that had suddenly morphed into a grotesque comedy. Kathy, Ryder slurred, his hands clumsily reaching out to grasp the fabric of her jeans. You dumped me before, because I was immature. But I've learned. I've learned how to love a woman. He was crying now, actual tears streaking down his flushed face as he looked up at the woman who was staring down at him with a mixture of triumph and mild disgust. I'm everything you wanted now, he pleaded, his voice cracking, stripping away every ounce of the champion's dignity I had spent years cultivating for him. Alexis wants to marry me, but she's not you. She's not you. Just be with me, Kathy. Standing in the quiet dark, I listened to the man I had loved debase himself, using my devotion as a bullet point on his resume for another woman. I've learned how to love a woman. The translation was brutally clear. He had used my patience, my affection, and my body as a simulator to prepare for the real thing. For 5 years, every tender moment, every late-night conversation, every sacrifice I had made had simply been practice for this pathetic display on a dirty bar floor. Kathy let out a sharp, mocking laugh, pulling her leg out of his grasp. Don't worry, Ryder, she said. her voice dripping with the arrogant certainty of someone who knew she had entirely won. But I could never marry someone who doesn't get racing. The irony of her statement was so profound, so astronomically absurd, that a genuine cold smile broke across my face. Someone who doesn't get racing. Ryder was kneeling in a puddle of spilled beer, desperately begging a woman who would only ever be a second-rate driver, all while discarding the very legend he had spent his adolescence worshipping. He wanted a muse who understood the track. He wanted the thrill of the exhaust and the prestige of a champion. Yet, in his profound blindness, he had just thrown away the only queen who possessed the power to crown him, all for a woman who merely liked the aesthetic of the sport. He had demanded gold, and in his ignorance, he had thrown away a diamond because he mistook it for glass. I didn't feel the urge to scream. I didn't want to run forward and slap him, or tearfully demand an explanation. The fiery indignation that usually accompanies a broken heart was entirely absent, replaced by the absolute zero of total detachment. The ridiculous farce was finally over. The boy kneeling on the floor was a stranger, a poor investment I was finally writing off. I quietly unclasped the team jacket I had draped over my shoulders, the jacket with his name stitched over the heart, and let it slip softly onto the back of a nearby chair. Let Kathy have him. They deserved each other's mediocrity. I turned toward the exit, ready to walk out of this bar and out of his life forever, when the heavy wooden doors near the entrance suddenly slammed open. The heavy wooden doors of the bar slammed against the wall with a deafening crack, instantly vaporizing the heavy, awkward tension Ryder had just created. The harsh street light flooded the entryway, illuminating a towering, imposing silhouette. It was Brock, the lead driver for the rival team we had narrowly beaten earlier that week. He was visibly drunk, his eyes bloodshot and fixed with a predatory glare directly on the center of our group. "Well, well, well," Brock sneered, his voice booming over the low hum of the bar. He took a heavy, unsteady step forward, pointing a thick finger straight at Kathy. "If it isn't Kathy Whitman, you dirty little slut, how dare you show your face around here?" The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. Kathy froze, her arrogant smirk vanishing, replaced by genuine shock. "Brock, you psycho!" she shot back, though her voice wavered. Brock barked a cruel, ugly laugh, advancing further into the room. He completely ignored Ryder, who was still struggling to pull himself up from the floor. "Ryder, you're the only idiot that still treats this bitch like she means something." Brock spat, gesturing wildly. "I'm telling you, man, she's all used up. Everybody's had a turn while she was overseas." "Shut up!" Kathy shrieked, taking a step back. "Don't listen to him, Ryder. He's lying." Ryder's reaction was instantaneous and entirely feral. The pathetic, weeping boy from a moment ago vanished, replaced by a blinding, unthinking rage. "Stop pretending you fucking know anything," Ryder roared, finally finding his footing. "You insult Kathy again, and I'll fucking kill you." Without a second of hesitation, Ryder lunged. He didn't care about his healing stomach, his upcoming championship, or the fact that a public brawl could cost him his sponsors. The sponsors I had spent years meticulously acquiring. He only saw the perceived slight against the woman he idolized. The brawl erupted with explosive violence. Ryder's fist connected with Brock's jaw, sending both men crashing backward into the tables. The remaining team members shouted, rushing forward in a chaotic, disorganized attempt to pull them apart. Chairs shattered, glasses exploded against the walls, and the previously quiet bar devolved into total pandemonium. I was standing near the edge of the booth, calculating the fastest route to the exit, when the chaotic mass of fighting men surged violently in my direction. Brock, in a desperate attempt to throw off Ryder, shoved a heavy oak table backward with massive force. I didn't have time to move. The solid wood edge struck me hard in the hip, throwing me off balance. I stumbled backward, my ankle twisting sharply, and crashed into the jagged remnants of a shattered glass display case. A sharp, burning pain ripped through my shoulder and forearm as glass sliced into my skin. I hit the floor hard, the breath knocked from my lungs. For a few chaotic seconds, the world spun in a blur of shouting and crashing furniture. I pressed a hand to my arm, feeling the warm, sticky flow of blood immediately soaking through my silk blouse. The physical pain was sharp and blinding, but what truly anchored me to the floor was the sight unfolding just 3 feet away. Ryder had broken free from the scrum. He was standing directly in my line of sight, his chest heaving. For a split second, his eyes met mine. He saw me on the floor. He saw the blood. "Ryder!" Kathy screamed from the opposite side of the room, entirely uninjured, but pointing frantically at a minor scratch on her wrist. "Ryder, he pushed me." Ryder didn't hesitate. He didn't blink. He broke eye contact with me and ran straight toward Kathy, wrapping his arms around her and checking her frantically for injuries, leaving me bleeding amidst the broken glass. That was the moment. That was the absolute, undeniable drop that caused the cup to overflow. The last 5 years had been a series of small, excusable indignities. I had excused his temper, his immaturity, his lack of foresight, attributing it to the pressure of the sport. But this profound, instinctual choice to abandon me when I was physically injured, to protect a woman who had merely been bumped, was unforgivable. It wasn't just a betrayal of love, it was a betrayal of basic human decency. I didn't call out to him. I simply pressed my uninjured hand against the floor and forced myself to sit up, the pain radiating through my shoulder. The noise of the bar seemed to fade into a dull, underwater hum. Suddenly, a shadow fell over me. Strong, unfamiliar arms, clad in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit jacket, reached down. I didn't see Ryder's racing jacket. I saw the sharp, cold elegance of high-end worsted wool. A hand firmly gripped my uninjured arm, pulling me up with effortless strength, shielding me from the ongoing chaos. I looked up into the composed, unreadable face of Mr. Hale. He didn't look at the fight, and he certainly didn't look at Ryder. His eyes were fixed solely on me, noting the blood and my pale face. "I believe," Mr. Hale said, his voice a low, commanding rumble that cut perfectly through the noise, "that it is time for us to leave, Miss Davenport." I leaned into his steady support, not out of affection, but out of necessity and profound relief. "Yes," I whispered, turning my back on the wreckage of Ryder Kane. "Take me away from here." The harsh, fluorescent sting of the hospital ceiling was the first thing that greeted me. The throbbing pain in my shoulder had dulled to a heavy, persistent ache, wrapped tightly in crisp, white bandages. I turned my head, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling my lungs, and found the room surprisingly peaceful. Sitting in the leather armchair near the window was Mr. Hale. He hadn't left. His suit jacket was draped meticulously over the back of the chair. His sleeves rolled up to the forearms as he typed quietly on a sleek silver laptop. There was no frantic pacing, no dramatic weeping, no loud declarations of guilt. He was simply there, an anchor of pragmatic stability in the aftermath of a storm I had finally escaped. "You're awake," he said. his voice smooth and steady, not looking up from his screen immediately. After a final keystroke, he closed the laptop and met my gaze. The doctor said it required 8 stitches, clean cuts, no permanent nerve damage. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice a bit raspy. "For last night, and for staying." He offered a slight, acknowledging nod. "A future husband's duty is to protect his investment, Miss Davenport. Though I must admit, your previous associates are remarkably unrefined." A small, genuine smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. "They are no longer my associates." I pushed myself up against the pillows, the physical pain a grounding reminder of my newfound clarity. "Yeah, the wedding is in 3 days. I don't want to delay it." "The arrangements are proceeding exactly as planned," he assured me, checking his watch. "My team has already taken over the West Side venue. It will be secure, private, and flawless." As if summoned by the mention of the outside world, my phone began to buzz violently on the bedside table. Celeste, my friend and the team's PR assistant, who had arrived earlier that morning with a change of clothes, picked it up. She glanced at the screen, her expression darkening into a scowl. "It's him," Celeste muttered, holding the device as if it were contaminated. "Ryder. He's called 6 times in the last hour. Want me to block it?" "No," I said, extending my uninjured hand. "Give it to me." I stared at the name flashing across the screen. For half a decade, that name lighting up my phone would trigger an immediate spike of adrenaline, a rush to fix a problem, soothe an ego, or manage a crisis. Now, looking at it, my pulse remained absolutely flat. I swiped to accept the call and pressed it to my ear. "Lexi? Where the hell are you?" Ryder's voice burst through the speaker, loud, impatient, and entirely oblivious. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. The sponsors are threatening to pull out because of that idiot Brock, and the mechanics haven't gotten the new suspension parts cleared. You need to get to the track and sort this out before practice." He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask where I went after the glass shattered. In his mind, I had magically transported myself to an office to continue serving him while he comforted Kathy. "I'm not at the track, Ryder," I said, my voice shockingly calm, devoid of any residual anger. "And I won't be coming in." There was a pause, a brief flicker of confusion on his end. "What are you talking about?" "Lexi, stop being dramatic about last night. I had to make sure Kathy was safe. You know how Brock is. You're fine. Now please, just come do your job." "My job is done," I replied smoothly, leaning back against the pillows. "The Davenport capital backing your team is officially withdrawn as of this morning. You can check your emails for the legal notice. As for the management, you'll have to find someone else to negotiate your suspension parts. Perhaps Kathy can use her extensive knowledge to help you." "Lexi, this isn't funny. You can't just quit." Panic finally began to thread through his arrogance. "Where are you? Let's just talk about this." "I am at the hospital. Mom getting stitches for the glass you left me in," I stated, presenting it as a simple fact rather than an accusation. "And I am busy, Ryder. I have a lot to get done before the wedding." The line went dead silent. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a man whose reality had just violently fractured. "Wedding?" he choked out, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. "What wedding? Lexi, what are you talking about?" "My wedding, Ryder," I said softly, delivering the final blow to his towering ego. "In 3 days, at the West Side venue, the one you thought was for your birthday party. Please don't call this number again. My fiancé prefers I don't maintain contact with past mistakes." I ended the call before he could formulate a response, tossing the phone onto the blanket. The notification of my marriage wasn't just a goodbye. It was an eviction notice. Ryder Kane had lived rent-free in my empire for 5 years, assuming he owned the place. It was time he learned what it meant to be locked out. The silk of the wedding gown felt exceptionally cold against my skin, a stark contrast to the thick, protective leather of a racing suit. Celeste stood behind me, her fingers nimbly fastening the long row of pearl buttons trailing down my spine. The reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror of the West Side venue's bridal suite was unrecognizable. A vision in ivory lace and diamonds, the perfect image of a billionaire's bride. There was no trace of the grease-stained manager or the heartbroken fool who had knelt in the glass. Today, I was Davenport royalty, securing my family's empire through an alliance that Ryder Kane could never dream of comprehending. "Today, you look breathtaking, Alexis," Celeste whispered, her eyes shining as she stepped back. "Mr. Hale won't know what hit him. He's already down at the altar, waiting." I offered a composed smile, but my focus was drawn irresistibly to the small, discreet screen on the vanity table. It wasn't streaming classical music or bridal inspiration. It was showing the live feed from the Grand Prix circuit across town. Today was not just my wedding day. It was the season's defining race. The camera panned over the grid. I immediately located Ryder's car, but the sleek, professional polish I had spent years maintaining was gone. The sponsor decals were sparsely applied, a direct result of the Davenport capital being withdrawn. A chaotic mess of mechanics swarmed around the vehicle, their movements lacking the precise, synchronized discipline I had instilled in them. "They're drowning," Celeste noted, her tone lacking any sympathy. "Without your strategic planning, they haven't even finalized their tire choice. The mechanics are lost. And Kathy..." The camera zoomed in on the pit wall. Kathy stood in my old spot, holding a headset she clearly didn't know how to operate. She looked overwhelmed, snapping frantically at the very crew members she had dismissed as unrefined just days ago. Ryder was inside the cockpit, his helmet on. But even from this distance, I could feel the suffocating weight of his panic. He had assumed that his natural talent was enough. Today, he was learning the absolute brutal necessity of the woman he had discarded as just practice. "It's time, Miss Davenport," Mr. Hale's lead security detail announced from the open door, his voice respectful but firm. I glanced at the screen one last time. The engines roared to life, a sound that usually set my blood on fire. Today, it sounded like a dying breath. Without a word, I closed the laptop, turning my back on the pathetic spectacle. That life was an investment I had finally written off. Stepping into the great hall of the West Side venue, the air was heavy with the scent of white roses, not the suffocating perfume of sunflowers or stale beer. The silence was dignified, punctuated only by the soft strains of a string quartet. Mr. Hale Alexander stood at the end of the aisle. He looked impeccably elegant in his tuxedo, his face a calm, unreadable mask. He didn't offer me a desperate, sloppy plea for affection. He offered me a strategic partnership, built on mutual respect and shared power. It was exactly what I needed. I walked toward him, my head high, the heavy lace train whispering against the marble floor. I didn't see the altar. I saw the future. I saw the boardrooms I would command, the global markets I would conquer, and the absolute power that was now mine. With every step, I felt the remaining traces of the placeholder dissolve, replaced by the crushing weight of my true identity. I was not a training simulator for Ryder's fantasies. I was Alexis Davenport. Alexander took my hand as I reached him. His grip was cool and firm, an anchor of solid certainty. He didn't fumble. As we turned to face the officiant, the distant roar of the racetrack echoed through my mind, but it no longer held any power over me. Let Ryder fail. Let him drown in the mediocrity he chose. Do you, Alexis Davenport, take... I looked at Alexander, seeing the partner who would help me build an invincible future. I do, I stated, my voice echoing with an absolute crystalline authority. As we sealed the contract with a sterile, polite kiss, a profound shift occurred within my soul. The long 5 years of suppression were over. The devoted manager was dead. The era of silence had ended. Alexander Hale hadn't just married a wife. He had crowned a monarch. The queen had returned, and she was done playing nice. Ryder Kane had demanded a muse who understood racing. I was about to give him a god, and she was coming to destroy him.